Hello and welcome to the Happy PharmD podcast. My name is Dr. Alex Barker. I'm the founder and CEO of the Happy PharmD, where we help pharmacists create inspiring careers and lives. And you may have noticed if you've heard other episodes, what is going on with your voice? Hey, don't worry about it, just a cold, but I've definitely under the weather. And I talk about it right away with my interview with Samm, CEO and co-founder of DocStation. You may have heard his story before. We've talked with him before, I believe, on the podcast. We'll put a link to a previous episode, and you'll hear how really his vision, his leadership of DocStation has evolved and changed over the years and where he's going to next. I love Sam's story, and I think you'll love it too, because it's very inspiring to hear someone who sees the problems of pharmacy, but also sees the solutions and the direction that we could go as a profession. And I'm really excited because the changes that he is making through his company is having influence on our profession at large. And I firmly believe that his company and many others as well will be creating new avenues for pharmacy to practice the profession, to make a difference in people's lives, to not do so much monotonous work, but to do things that is profitable and to do things that ultimately help our patients. And so with that, let's jump into the interview. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how raspy is my voice right now?
I'd say you're doing like 10 being the most raspy. I'd say maybe you're at a 5.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Um, got any pharmacy recommendations besides honey and tea? Because that's what's on the docket
Man,
right
I wish I
now.
did. I wish I did. It's been, oh shoot, like the better part of a decade since I practiced, but I think you're doing the right things.
Yeah, that's something that I'm glad to have left behind from entrepreneurship is
Yeah.
practice. One thing that I admire about you and what you've done is you had the audacity to find a huge problem in the healthcare space and convince yourself, yeah, this is a problem I can solve.
Yeah.
Do you see that still now that you've been running this business for years?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I knew it was going to be a long-term endeavor to accomplish what, I kind of saw as one of the biggest problems, but more importantly, the biggest opportunities to impact the healthcare system from a pharmacist and the pharmacy perspective. So I think looking back on all this, really glad that I made the choice and pulled the trigger to go down this route. And there's a lot more work to do, but I feel like we've knocked out some big barriers, and the a lot of progress that'll happen in the next couple of years will be huge for the industry. And I'm glad we're in the middle of it. Glad that we're part of it.
Yeah, what a time to be alive. Both from a you I think you could be scared. Before we were talking, I kind of mentioned all of the craziness going on in the world. Um, when you were practicing pharmacy and you had thought about all of these different problems, I think those of us who are interested in entrepreneurship can get lost in the decision-making process of what what problem do I really want to solve?
Yeah.
Um, and you clearly have, a vision in mind for what's the change you want to see. But when you were in the thick of it, did you have the clarity that you have now about where do I put my focus? What problems do I really want to solve, or what's going to make the different impact? Like where was your thought process in at least in the beginning phase?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's the same as it is today. I mean, it always starts with a big vision. You're gonna start a technology company. What are you
Yeah.
trying to solve here? And I learned early on in the process, like the role that I play changes and evolves over time, but you kind of always have three particular jobs that you want to keep in mind throughout that. And then the first one is setting the vision. And so in the very beginning, the technology that we were building was, platform electronic health record for pharmacists to practice as providers, right? Like any other outpatient, physician or nurse practitioner, you name it. Um, and then when you break down that vision and what we're trying to accomplish, it's fixing the access problem in America, right? Like making sure that there are enough practitioners out there to interact with patients and talk to them about their healthcare journey, about their medications, keep them healthy and well and out of the hospital and living a really great quality of life. And that's the path that we're still on. And like what you execute on and the actions that you take in any given day or week or month changes over time. It's just about
Yeah.
knocking down that next barrier to getting to that next step.
Yeah. But since you started, and what year was that again? What was the year
We
you started?
incorporated in 2017 February.
Okay. Before the pandemic, and you went through the pandemic, and you're still kicking it.
Yep, still alive and kicking.
You've taken a much different approach, even from what I think I share about my business, in that you very publicly show people where you're at and what you're focusing on and what you're doing. I've really enjoyed the journey. It's been great to follow you on LinkedIn and to see your pharmacy visits where you go into clinics and you show up and you're in it.
Hmm.
For me, that's inspiring because sometimes I think when you grow a business, you eventually hear the advice of you need to hire people and you need to not be so involved with things.
Hmm.
But with you, I see a, an amazingly strong commitment to your vision. When How has your commitment to this vision, how has it changed your strategy over time? Because obviously what you're doing today is very different than where you started from in 2017.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the commitment's always been consistent. I think it's as time goes by and you accomplish things along the way, like the particular, the big thing that you're trying to do just changes and evolves over time. And
Mhm,
so, and you're factoring in a lot of different dynamics, right? You're factoring in the market and how ready it is and how, willing, your customer group or your target base or whatever you want to call it is ready for this change that you've been preaching about. And you're trying to get a sense of how far your technology that you're building is coming along and what the capabilities are and what that next capability that's going to unlock that next phase of your business is going to be. And I think the way that my perspective has evolved over time is you can only do so much, right? So I've got to pick and choose what type of CEO I want to be this month and where I'm going to put my time and
yeah,
my focus.
I'm not
And
laughing
there
at you. I'm laughing because I can relate, and it can be frustrating to constantly change the role.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. It's frustrating for a very long time because you want to be everywhere at once, right? You want to be at that conference and you want to be standing on that podium and talking and preaching the good word and recruiting, people. But at the same time, you've only got, 3 or 4 months of money left and you've got to be spending all of your time talking to investors and trying to get that next round of funding.
Mm,
And at times, I want to be, hands on and roll up my sleeves and be in the product and figure out, what this new feature is going to look like that we're designing. And I think, you just continue to bring and recruit good people onto the team and, over time, just trust in them and let them do some of that work so that, I can pop my head up and be like, okay, now where can I make the most impact today?
mm. How do you orient yourself to that role? I think what's interesting from a pharmacist perspective, and I hear it in the subtext of what you're sharing, that
Hmm.
you really want to serve, um,
Hmm.
and I could totally relate to that. My greatest joy is getting one on one with one of our clients and just helping them overcome whatever their problem is. But I don't have unlimited time,
Right.
right? And I think people who do get into business do struggle with this concept of what is the most effective thing that I can do right now.
Yep.
So I was curious about, what does your process look like for deciding what is that role for me to take this month?
Yeah. I think it just starts in, you know, whether you do this systematically or whether you kind of do it ad hoc. But I find myself at least every 3 weeks, probably every two. And what I'd like to get is every one, is just taking some time and stopping, just stopping what I'm doing and blocking off
Mm,
maybe like a half day to take a step back, breathe, think about what I accomplished the last 2 weeks, and then say, okay, so based on where we are right now, what's the big thing that I need to do next, right? Do I need to
mhm,
recruit this next hire or this next leader that's going to fix, the two or three other problems that are on my mind? But I know that I'm not in a position to actually get that work done or do
yeah.
that. That would set us back. And so, I think these updates that I send out too, you talk about the writing and being open with the business. And I've been pretty good at doing that almost every week for the past 2, 3 years. And I think that is also one of those just level setting moments where you take a step back and you think about, okay, where are we at? And, what do I want to tell people today,
Mhm.
about, the inner workings of the company and the long-term trajectory. And those little reset moments are good to help reframe. And then you kind of make you know, a plan of attack. And you think, hey, here are the things that I want to accomplish this week. And maybe that extends into 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And you just go hard on that. And then you pop back out again and you do the same exercise all over again, because things change, so quickly. And it's dynamic, kind of evolving um, organism, the company, the business, and what you're trying to do.
I can relate. My process is Monday morning, I have a meeting with my mentor and coach, and it's funny how I can let outside pressures influence in the moment where I'm at, or it sends me down a path of thinking that can lead me to poorer outcomes. I start thinking about how and plans and organization and strategy, and admittedly, those things are not my strength.
Um,
Um, a reset of being able to pause and hear outside perspective is oh so powerful. When you are able to take that time and you think about those things, what have been some of the really impactful decisions you have made that have made huge differences? Nothing proprietary,
yeah,
but
sure.
just, thinking bigger picture, what's been like some of the best decisions you've made for yourself that have, um, maybe not necessarily made you business successful, like, "Oh, I made this decision and I'm a millionaire now." Just more like, what's something that you've been really proud of that you decided to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to touch back on something that you just said too, though, about the mentors, um, and having that structured, dedicated time where you can talk to somebody else, right, and help you like sort out your thoughts and make that plan. And I've got regular meetings with mentors on my calendar, and sometimes they're once a month or every other week, and with one or two, it's weekly. So you
Yeah.
get that reflection time, and you get to bounce it off folks, and then hear different opinions, right? Because depending on who you talk to, you might get different perspectives, different opinions, and you got to then again set that time aside and reflect and decide what you're actually going to do. Um, and so I don't know, like there's different decisions over time that I think of, that I've been proud of, are probably like the hardest decisions in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like early on, after we brought our first customer on, really had some revenue going. We were able to pay for my salary and Josh's salary, my co-founder. And we said, okay, it's time to go, and posted some positions and hired a few people. And then 2.5 months into it, we realized, hey, we kind of got in over our skis a little bit. And it was really difficult, but, we let a couple people go. And looking back on, a situation like that, it's really tough. And I think the people that are willing to admit mistakes and make corrective actions, or if you're not in a position to make a corrective action, just don't make the same mistake again, moving forward. And I think that's the reason why we've been around for so long, is that we continuously get into these situations where we're like, okay, do we make this hire now or do we wait? Do we lately I'm talking a lot about funding right now just because it's fresh in mind, but do
Yeah.
you cut staff? Do you do layoffs, or do you maintain with the people that you have and just be open and transparent with them about financial situation of the company, and ideally, hopefully, you make it to the other side.
For more reasons than I can count, I can relate to being proud of really hard decisions. Even recently, I've had to make some hard decisions like that about
Hmm.
seeing where as a company are we unhealthy? What are we doing that's a little bit silly and foolish, and to maintain, I don't know, status quo? And I think in the moment of making those hard decisions as a leader, I find myself valuing the relationship of that person
Hmm.
more than I value my commitment to the change I want to make in the world, right?
Sure.
It's it's easier, I suppose, to allow the relationship of what I have to be the priority over the success of the business.
Hmm.
That's been a hard lesson for me to learn. Um, and I don't know what your journey has been like as a pharmacist, but I see pharmacists as being very relationally driven. You know,
Most
we
definitely.
we care for people.
Hmm.
um, have you gone through a similar, I don't know, journey of seeing how you value people, and seeing, I don't know, perhaps having the awareness of, do I value people over the business or the business over people?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it sounds like you're an empathetic leader, like I am. Like, you relate to people,
Yeah, we're
and
perfect. We're just the best
yeah,
leaders. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just it's one aspect that I think that is critical to running a business and getting people to follow you, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's all about self awareness in those respects too, because to be in a situation where hey, I think I'm weighing this relationship or this partnership, uh, and a little bit biased towards that than I am
Yeah.
towards the business decision that needs to be made. And I think it's all about understanding the self-awareness, but then also understanding, like, is this a short-term thing that I'm optimizing for, or is this good for the long term?
Yeah.
And I think when you take a step back and allow yourself to kind of take the relationship aspect out of it, you have to understand that, like, okay, this might be a hard decision right now, but ultimately the people on the other side are going to understand it. I'm sorry, I don't have the time, or we don't have the bandwidth to do this right now. We really want to really value you as a person and our relationship, but here's the reasons why we need to do this now.
Mm,
And I think, yeah, folks understand that. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the larger vision and move that forward. And eventually, you're going to be able to help this person in the same way that they want you to now, or maybe in a different way later on. Um, and so it kind of becomes, you put it into kind of like a larger context, and that help you make these decisions and learn over time, because then you get to see the results of saying no, right? And go to
mm.
some of the hardest things to do, and going back to the decisions that you made over time, is if you're able to say no to something so you can focus on the most important thing, more often than not, that works out to your benefit in the end.
Wise words. Yeah, excuse me. It hits home now for me, um, because I've had to, well, I've, without sharing too much detail, I've seen in me where my commitment to things has been lacking.
Hmm.
And I have really increased my level of commitment to the business, to our clients, to who we serve. And the transformation that I've seen in myself is there's there's no more tolerance anymore for incompetencies or just mediocrity.
Hmm.
And that's hard when you have allowed it relationally with people, right? For the team dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, as your role has been, expanded over time, and you take on so many hats, what's been your way to decompress from the business and the stress? What do you find is really helpful for you?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, honestly. And yeah, I was thinking about it recently too, because we just got over this hump. Like, we got a term sheet signed. We're going to get some more financing in the door here, and that was a huge relief. And I felt like
Mm,
afterwards I would be more relieved than I actually felt, right?
mm,
And I think partially it was like I knew I know I have to put in another month and a half of work before I'm going to be able to relax and take my mind off of things, or take my eye off the ball for a second, intentionally take my eye off the ball for a second. And so I think for me, like, just decompressing is, I'm either all in or I'm all out at any given time.
yeah,
And for the past year I've been 99% in, and that 1% of time is when you know i'm I'm like going to see my family, for the weekend, or going to visit friends, which I just haven't haven't been able to do in the last 12 months. Like, the relationships that I have with people are, I mean, they're there, and we'll pick back up where we left off. But I've just kind of
yeah,
set things aside, and
mm,
so I think the big thing is just disengaging, right, and just turning that out of office auto reply on, and just stepping away and having dedicated time. Um, and I'm going to take at least a week, ideally before the end of this year, in order to do that. And every time I've done that in the past, I always come back more refreshed and more clarity in the thinking and the strategy, and just need to start prioritizing it a lot better.
I've found that when you listen to your team, they see the patterns in you better than you see them yourself. Um, my COO, Sarah, has pointed out to me, every 2 months, I go into a funk where I'm not as creative, I'm tired, I'm not wanting to, like, be all in, you know?
Hmm.
And what I have found is a 4-day weekend is so rejuvenating.
Yeah.
I have it planned now. Every 2 months, I take that weekend to fully rest up, and I usually find that I get recommitted to the vision or mission, or, whatever has been lacking in my energy. Um, it's been so helpful to rely on others to see that pattern, because I think in the moment, what's the worst thing about being a CEO or the leader of a company is you can get lost in the day-to-day minutia and you lose sight of that big picture vision of where you're going.
Yeah.
For you and your vision for what you've been working on for years now, what is what's the way you anchor yourself into that? Is it milestones? Is it like a year planning exercise? Is it your gut feeling about what's needed to do next?
Yeah, I think it's continuously changing, I would say. I think,
Mm,
like gut, like you said, you can use metrics. We set metrics internally. Really what those metrics boil down to is, like, here's the next big thing that we're trying to accomplish, the next hill that we need to climb to get to the other side, to do the
mhm,
next 4 or 5 things that we need to do, right?
yep,
And based on the size of your company and the stage, you might be able to climb a couple hills at once, but from where we are, like we can climb basically one big one at a time, right? And there's value into rallying everybody around to work at climbing this hill together, right? And being on the same page.
Mm.
And I think along the way, like, talk about this as a journey, right? Multiple hills to climb. Each hill that you climb, you're getting closer to that goal, right? That flag at the top of the mountain. And along the way, you're reading things, you're observing, and you're making sure that you're on the right path, right? And so, the 6.5 years we've been doing this, every step along the way, we get positive feedback, whether it be from customers, whether it be a national association starting to talk about the things that we're doing. And we've kind of known this all along, and maybe we're influencing the direction that the market's heading in some way, shape, or form. But really, all along, like, we saw this happening, and so we're glad to be in the spot that we are. But if it was different, like let's say we're climbing hills along the way and we got negative feedback, and there is some of that, but it's the balance is overwhelmingly towards the positive. And although you can't see, you're not at the end goal yet, you know that you're heading in the right direction. And there's still, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. It's going to take 2, 3, 4 more years, but we're on the right track. And so I think that's what ultimately grounds me and, determines, because, time is valuable. You got one life to live, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm contributing to that. I'm heading in the right direction. And so you constantly have to like check in with yourself to make sure that you feel like you're on the right path and you're leading people in the right direction.
What is that next big milestone for you that's got you really excited?
Yeah. So, I mean, we spent the last 2 years building out this mechanism for pharmacists to bill as providers, essentially, right? So that was a huge undertaking, a lot of technology development, a lot of market research, and we've kind of, made ourselves the expert in this field, so to speak. And so we now have, we deployed this automation. It makes it really easy for pharmacists to start billing for services, because, everyone's got so much time and demands and, staffing, quote unquote, shortages, so to speak. And so, we feel like we've got, like the silver bullet, honestly, for what we need to do next. And the main thing is we've got all these claims going out the door. We need to make sure that all these claims going out the door are getting paid, and we're optimizing for billing the right CPT codes, right? And that's the next big thing, right? And so if we can, we're putting together right now like a strategy on how we go to market. Like how do we go to market in Texas, in a state that has provider status, right? Kentucky, California, and I think the bill's on the governor's desk right now. So we're compiling a lot of the intelligence that we need that's going to fuel our strategy moving forward. And then from there, our focus shifts to, okay, we've built this really great product. We know what we're doing. Now it's a full court press on the entire market. So, marketing, attending every conference, and really like what we've done from the beginning, kind of shouting this from the mountaintops, but amplify that times 100, right? And that's when I think it really gets exciting. And it has been along the way, but it's like, shoot, man, you got to take 7 years to build the thing, and then you're going to, expand it and get into the hands of as many pharmacies as possible. So that's kind of the next big thing. And you kind of heard me talking about the second and the third hill that comes after this, but yeah, that's the main thing: revenue cycle management.
Exciting stuff for the right crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Well said.
When you had this idea, what was like the deciding factor to go venture capital versus self-developed? What's popular really right now in the business community, I'm sure you've seen this with any kind of SaaS business, software as a service, for those not heard of it before.
Mhm.
The self-starter, I've built a software and I sell it. It's on my website and it's there and it's happening.
Mhm.
These are people who are often, you know, solo entrepreneurs. And then there's the real serious crowd, the venture capital crowd, where everyone's talking about, all sorts of finance and banking lingo, and they sound slick and cool, and they're living on, you know, New York City and the central hub of all of it.
Mhm.
What made you say, I'm going to go that route versus going, I don't want to say the easier route, but certainly I think one could say maybe less pressure? Le less
Yeah.
less pressure for sure?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, when you talk about those two paths as being completely unique on their own, right? I think like a lot of people never are in a position to be able to choose which path they
Mm,
go down. I think for a lot of companies, they're trying to get something off the ground. It's going to take, people to do that, and so venture capital is really the only way that they can go.
mm,
Um, looking back, I think partially it was because it seemed as though that's what every major successful technology company did,
sure.
right? You look at, back in the day, the Airbnbs and the Ubers and,
Yeah.
those companies of the world, they all went through Y Combinator, right? They all raised tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. And you see them, you're like, that's where we're trying to get in terms of impact on society.
Mm,
And so you think, okay, well, we're probably going to need to do this at one time or another. And what it came down to for us really was just a matter of survival. Like we did a really great job bootstrapping at the beginning, right? Our first money in the door was from customers, a
yeah.
big customer, and that was huge. Right time, right place for us. And looking back, we probably could have bootstrapped for years if we had that mindset as we're gonna try to do this as long as we possibly can.
Mm,
When we raised our first major round of funding, it was around this idea of okay, so now before we had like a payer based business. You can think about it as like MTM 2.0, right? We go to
mm,
payers, we sell them a platform and the ability to roll out value based programs with pharmacies. That was a good business, but it moved slow. And so billing and revenue cycle management, everything that we're kind of focused on today, um, was going to take time to build, engineering talent and resources to build. And uh, it was, for us, right to get some capital in the door to make sure that we had the time and the talent to get this into market.
yeah.
Um, but once you make that decision, like you're on the train, ship has sailed. There's no really turning back,
Yeah.
and it's an all-out
Mm,
sprint to profitability. And all the changes in the market that have occurred, it's just like everyone's now finally come back to reality, right? The way things have been done, like you raise money to get to the next step, but you're ultimately on a path to profitability. And so it's kind of encouraging to see the market, yeah, come back to reality a little bit.
yeah. I would say before COVID, we were kind of in a fantasy world. I mean, people think, these major I don't know all the statistics like I used to, but I remember finding out things like major corporations haven't made money in a really long time. And I'm talking corporations as big as Airbnb and stuff,
Hmm.
and Uber. Um, and I haven't really gotten back involved in that world. Um, but it was not disheartening because I wasn't really considering ever going that path as a company, but I can now appreciate the readjustment to say, okay, we have these billion-dollar companies that are losing money. Things have to change. We can't continue to operate in that fantasy world. Has that changed your approach now to how you are seeking out future venture capital?
No, not really. I mean, we've been on I've been of this mindset, like, we needed to raise venture, and we continue to do, to accelerate what we're aiming to do. And I
Hmm.
think, 7 years later, we've got, like, one side of our business, profitable. I mean, we paid taxes, like, a few years ago, um, and we could have continued to do that. But now we're investing in this ancillary business that, um, we need to get profitable as well. And
Mm.
so from where we're at, we're 24 months away from that, right? And we're doing everything that we can to use our resources efficiently and effectively, and make the right bets that are going to get us there in that 24 months of time. The intention is to get
Yeah.
off. Once you have to get on, and you're going to stay on
Yeah.
until you get there. But the intention is to, yeah, deboard, um, and then, figure out where to go next and how to grow. And that might involve raising some additional capital as well. But that's the mindset that we've had this entire time.
Good. Well, you've had you made the right decision the first time. It's good that you haven't had to readjust.
Yeah.
Um, Knowing what you know now about how the pharmacy services has changed and evolved, where it's probably heading so in the future, what things would you like to maybe change or add on to how pharmacists are trained, clinically and professionally? Um, I'm very interested in this myself because I see the end product. I see
Hmm.
where pharmacists come out and how they behave and how they think about what they can or a lot can't do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I'm of the mind that the healthcare system will not, it's not going to, it will change significantly in the next 10 years. The systems that are in place are not created for sustainability. If you got to be in charge of the planning committee for how we need to prepare pharmacists for the future, what would you love to see happen? Or what would you change maybe about what's currently in place?
Yeah, it's a big question,
Yeah,
because I
sure.
think there's a lot of dynamics at play, right? So think about, like, the macro level trends, right? So prescription reimbursement changed
Mm,
dramatic. Let's and in the frame of, like, what's happened in the last decade and what we think is going to happen in the next decade. In the last decade, margins chopped down, PBM pressure, squeezing reimbursement, DIR fees, you name it, right? And so from that perspective, it feels as though that prescriptions are just a moot point in terms of business and business growth moving forward. Like, they're a loss leader. Like, you're
sure.
you're going to cover your cost effectively, right?
Mhm.
And then you look at, okay, so what happens to retail pharmacy, independent pharmacy moving forward? Places where most pharmacists, when they graduate, go into. And snapshot today, you got pharmacists walking off the job demanding, better pay and bathroom breaks and lunch breaks and things that seem pretty reasonable. Uh, and
Yeah.
so, working conditions, right? And you have
Yeah,
again, the
absolutely.
shortage, right? But really, you have people that are just so fed up with the way they're being treated. They're just like, I'll just go find another way to make money, you
Yeah.
know, whether I'm using my doctorate or not. Um, so you can see this point in time as a little bit of an inflection point, right? And so I think it's going to take the industry and leaders and educators and deans and, residency accreditors just to think about, what's going to happen in the next 10 years with job opportunities with AI. Uh, and I think, the repetitive tasks about dispensing can become, much more efficient and maybe less people oriented. So how do we set up the workforce and future pharmacists and pharmacy technicians for success in the next decade? And I think it's thinking about how practice evolves, right? Like, how will we kind of shift to providing more services at
Mhm.
retail and independent pharmacies? How will pharmacists be used? And I think we've done an exceptional job in the last 50 years of building that foundation for education, with the PharmD, with residency programs. So people are walking out, they're fully equipped to be clinicians, but then it's like, how do we use those skills in practice to impact patient care, and how do we create jobs with this opportunity? So I feel like we're at the forefront of that, figuring out, okay, how do we actually get the money in for cognitive services that improve outcomes at decreased costs? And if we can be kind of the engine to, create jobs or help evolve the job of the
Yeah.
pharmacist, um, I think that's important. So going back to like, how do we change how we're training pharmacists? I think it's just, in real time, figuring out, okay, where are the new jobs going to be created, and
Mhm.
how do we uh, polish or provide like the end, kind of product of this clinical training, to say, okay, you're going to set up, we need to teach you the skills about how you're going to open up your own practice, right? How you're going to contract with insurance companies, for
Mhm.
services, not for prescriptions, right? Um, I think that's where it could go and probably should go in the next few years.
Yeah, we're a service business that has been dependent upon a product and companies to pay for that product for years.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the way we train people has ultimately made us very reliant on it, without getting innovative. I love the focus that your company has on making it easier to provide those services. Um, that's how we're going to innovate and create a new future for pharmacy, because you're right. Unless things drastically change, or you go the fraud route, which I don't think you should, making money with prescription meds is just no longer the case for the typical independent, or up and coming pharmacy entrepreneur. Um, what I would add on to the new vision that you've shared is to come up with real case scenarios that independents and community pharmacies have for what they're facing, and how can we create those services? What can we do to provide people in order to help them? Um,
Yep.
and that's why you got to pay either one of us for consulting fees to make that happen.
That's right.
Because
Yep.
we don't want to share that in a public recorded podcast. But when I think about the future of pharmacy, and I think about what it is that you're doing, I get very excited for the future, um, because there are so many problems, but there's not a lot of people at the table innovating or creating those avenues for people. It sounds like you're probably of a similar mindset as me, that this newer generation, whether a pharmacists, whether they want to accept it or not, that the new job role is very similar to that of like a consultant, or a mid-level, um, practitioner,
Mhm.
one that works along with other practitioners, doctors, has contracts. Is that the vision that you are hoping for in pharmacy, or is it kind of like another subset of pharmacy, or what we could be?
No, I think that's what I'm envisioning. Uh, our where we're going, and how this evolution will take place. I don't think it will uh, you know happen like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and so
you're
if you play
talking
that out,
about huge governmental systems that have to change. I mean, snail
right?
space.
Totally. And you're what we should not do, that we always do, is we create another designation or another degree, or like we split the profession into another
Yeah.
faction of sorts, right? And we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot because we create self-imposed barriers to achieving what we're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
But I think organically what will happen is you'll see people, like, once these opportunities are there and in front of them. I think that's where we're at right now. I think you see a large subset of pharmacists and pharmacies being like, all right, okay, services is the thing. I'm willing to fight and do whatever it takes, and hire another staff on, or a resident or whatever, to get these off the ground. But they need to be we need to teach them how to do that, right? I mean,
Mm,
give them the tools that enable them to do that and get to that next step. And so, you'll see some pharmacists take that and run with it, and they'll be, out in front, waving the flag and leading the charge. And you'll see some folks just be a little bit more slow to the uptake, and you'll see some die in the process, because they choose not to change, or it's time for them to retire and close or sell their business.
sure.
And so I think you'll see some attrition in that way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. But on the other side, you'll have a reinvented, stronger, more refined, workforce and business model, and one that we can actually build upon, right? Like, you're not going to start a pharmacy to deal with DIR fees and crappy reimbursement, but you could start a practice, and learn from all the other experts that have now done it, uh, and build from that. And then I think you'll see like a renaissance of sorts,
Mm.
in our profession. But we still got to trudge through the mud and the crap and the difficulties of getting there. But I think we're closer to that point than we ever have been.
Alex, maybe this episode is just about your therapy session. It was really good to talk with Sam because it was nice to hear how he's taken his leadership, leaned into his commitments, and he's been able to see the change through his company, provide great services to people, and ultimately grow and improve his product. Sam has gone through so much in his company. And if I hope that you heard this and you now have become a fan of Sam. You go ahead and follow him. He sends out emails, like he said, every week, practically, I think, to provide updates on what he's working on, what's going on in the company. I so appreciate it because it gives me an inner look as to what is going on at DocStation. A little bit inspirational for me. Perhaps I should be doing the same thing. Maybe that's what this podcast is also about. Thank you for listening to this episode. Let us know if you enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. And until we see you in the next episode, I hope you're having a great rest of your day.